Hello there. Welcome to this video on Socratease Infra. Socratease Infra's JavaScript SDK enables e-learning on your site with just a few lines of code. Imagine you want to enable e-learning on your website on a specific route. Let's say your website URL is yoursite.com and you want to enable it on /e-learning. To enable Socratease, all you have to do is to configure your backend to return an HTML file on this route. We'll take a look at this on Code Sandbox. Here, the URL will be generated automatically. The HTML file will look something like this. You include a few lines of external JavaScript at the top. You feed a username and a role. We are hard coding the username here, but of course, this will come dynamically from your backend. For role, we are passing CA, which is a content administrator. That is, this user can create content. There are some other parameters here that we will come back to at the end of the video. If I preview this, you will see that the UI is that of someone who can create content. They can create a course, they can create a lesson, they can create a quiz, for example. Let's say you want to create a quiz. The question type is that of an MCQ. You ask a question. You choose the correct answer and you save. It will say that the quiz has been updated successfully. Now, you want to share the link of this quiz. And obviously, you want a different user to take this quiz, right? So the change you would make is, if it's a different user, they will have a different username. So let's say they're a learner and I choose learner 3. They're not a content administrator because they're not creating content. So the role is not that of a CA. You can optionally pass in other user details. Say learner 3. This is the only change that you'll have to make. Now, if I save this file and I paste the link to the quiz, you will see that the UI has completely changed. You will see that the name is learner3, which is what we passed. And this is the view that you would want the person who's taking the quiz to see. And now the person chooses an option, say they choose the wrong answer, they submit, and they get the result of the quiz. So they've attempted one question and they've answered none and so on, right? So basically, by only changing the username and then adding some additional details, you're able to control what the user sees. You may have also noticed that Code Sandbox is not just serving the initial URL that we started with, but anything that comes under that route. So anything that is coming under /content is being served. Similarly, when you code your backend, you'll have to ensure that all pages that you want Socratease enabled on should return the same HTML file. It is not just one. For example, if you're looking at something like Flask, if you want to host your learning on a /learning path, anything that comes under /learning will have to be rendered by the Socratease HTML. Let's say you're using Express.js. So here, anything that is /learning or that comes under /learning with this star should return Socratease HTML and the username and maybe some additional parameters. Let us now return to the other parameters that get passed to the Socratease library. The first parameter is that of the JSON payload. This just takes the payload, which has the username, user details, and so on, and converts it into a JSON string. Now, the client ID and the client secret are a key pair that get generated when you create your account. Of course, the secret must be kept secret and should be stored only in your backend. We are including it in the front end here only for demo purposes. This next step is crucial. We take the payload as a JSON, we convert it into a hash using the HMAC algorithm with SHA-256, and it is being signed by the client secret. Alright, this is a security measure and all this must happen on your backend. You can read more about HMAC authentication in the link in the description, but this step ensures that people who have access to your website don't tamper with the data you're sending. For example, you may want to restrict content admin features, the ability to create content to a certain set of users. But if we did not have this step, any user could add role CA in the front end and they will get access to the content admin features. But because we have this HMAC payload coming in from the backend, if they made this change, the HMAC of the payload would differ from what is being sent. And because they do not have access to the client secret, they will not be able to sign the payload. And so Socratease backend will then prevent them from accessing the CA features, right? So this basically ensures that the payload that is being sent is being signed by you in the backend, and so we can trust the payload that we are receiving. The last line of code basically is encoding the HMAC payload as a base 64 string. And so then you initialize the Socratease library with the client ID, the payload that you want, which is this, and the HMAC of that. One last point. As you saw earlier, the Socratease SDK loads whatever URL is on the browser. You don't need to add any additional code for this. By default, the SDK picks the URL in the browser and loads the corresponding component. If you want to override this behavior, you can, but it is simple to just let Socratease handle everything. In summary, all you need to do to enable Socratease on your site is define a route on your backend and serve an HTML file like this one. All Socratease related URLs should be served by this route. The username and HMAC will come from your backend. Depending on the route, Socratease will automatically render the corresponding UI.